This episode of Rookie Hunter is proudly brought to you by the Wild Sheep Foundation. Become a member, renew your membership, and join the Less Than One Club at wildsheepfoundation.org. And make sure to check out Sheep Fever, the official podcast of the Wild Sheep Foundation. Do your part to put and keep wild sheep on the mountain. Hey guys, welcome to episode 154. Very excited to have my friend Adam Janke on the show. I'm assuming most of you know him from the Journal of Mountain Hunting, and he is the host of Beyond the Kill. I don't think he needs that much of an introduction, but nice that we finally got to catch up. It's been a long time since we've done a podcast together, and we actually used to do, I know we did a number, I don't know how many, swapcast back in the day. So this is actually going to air on Beyond the Kill as well. So if you're listening to both of us, you're going to hear the same show twice. Anyways, very excited to have Adam back on the show. And quick reminder before we get into things here that you can actually book the Peppermill in Reno for Sheep Show 2025. And as I said before, I know that's a long ways away, but they're actually almost 50% sold out. So I'm still slacking. I need to do this right away because the Peppermill is the place you want to be if you're going to be at Sheep Show. So I'll put another link in the show notes for that. And also to all of you BC residents, sheep counts are taking place, and the Wild Sheep Society of BC is organizing those. There's one happening tomorrow actually at Spence's Bridge, and there's a number of them happening up around Kamloops. I'm planning to go to the one on the 20th, I believe, which is a Saturday. So hope to see some of you guys out at those. They're a lot of fun. It's a good way for you to donate some of your time for a good cause. And if you want to keep track of what's going on and how to get involved, best way would probably be to follow the Wild Sheep Society of BC on Facebook or Instagram, whatever you prefer. But let's get into this episode. Sit back, relax, crack an ice cold beer, and enjoy episode 154 with Adam Janke. Adam Janke, welcome. I'm driving the ship today. I'm taking over BTK.
All right, I like it.
You can be a guest for once. What's how you doing, man?
I'm good, man. It's I'm good. I can't complain. I'm happy to see spring arrive.
Yeah,
that's for sure. And yeah, I mean, I'm getting the itch to get out for bears. I think, not to dive in right away, but I think you and I both spent a fair bit of time on the trails, pretty close to year round.
Totally.
And this is since we moved here, which is, I think this is our 8th year? Let me just do the quick math on that. Yeah, 8th year here in the Okanagan. And this will be the earliest green up I've seen. Like there's spots where there's grass, right? And I mean, that was a week ago and we were still in March and I haven't seen that before. I mean, obviously we all know it was a winter to forget if you're into snow sports. And but hopefully that means for those of us that like to chase bears or maybe turkeys, I have no idea how this impacts turkeys at all.
Yeah, I don't know.
But certainly on the bear side of things, it should make for a longer season, right? We can actually get out earlier and hopefully even like, the big thing for me every year is I want to do backpacking for bears if I can. Harder done than said, given the realities of snowpack in BC and frankly, just, where the density of bears are going to be. If you got like one day or, one overnight to go out, it makes a backpack bear hunt tougher, right? But with what looks to be a very early start to spring and what should be early green up, maybe some of those places that you're like, shit, I got to go in like the last week of June, obviously depending on your region. You might even be able to do that in May.
Yeah,
right. And
for
so,
sure.
That's cool. That's cool.
I know it's been pretty rare that April 1st is bear season for us, it's been very rare that we can go out and hunt bear on April 1st. I mean, the idea is there, the excitement is there, but it's just not really in the cards.
No.
You got to wait, at least till the end of April. But I think I'd be confident to go out there right now and start chasing some things around.
I would think there's some moving around,
Yeah.
Classic thing, lower now than higher. But again, like some of the places I've been, whether it's rucking or trail running in the last couple of weeks, I mean, they're not super high. They're, we're certainly not talking alpine, and we can still see snow up in the upper strata of the mountains around here. But there's definitely green up. There's definitely green up.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. One of the first things I wanted to ask you about, because fitness is a big part of BTK in the journal. So I was curious, do you train for spring season, or do you kind of use it as an opportunity to train for the fall? There's a lot of talk about, prep for, sheep hunting and any big game stuff in fall, but it's rare that we talk about getting ready for bear season, right?
For the spring,
Yeah.
That's kind of a tough one for me on a personal level to answer, because I try to train year round, and the training regimen, if we want to call it that, changes, of course. In years past, I never really let snow stop me from getting out on the trails, and whether that was just post holing through the snow with a backpack on, or running what I could, and just hiking through the snow when I could, or snowshoeing or anything like that. Last couple of years, for sure, I've done less of that. So there's no question that this isn't a good spring to compare it to, because I'm training for a trail race right now. So I've been getting quite a bit of endurance type training in.
Yeah.
The last probably 2 seasons, I definitely let my cardio slack
over
the winter months. And like, I don't have a gym membership. I've dabbled in a couple of options, etc. And there's no question that, like, if you have an early start like this to spring, I mean, and you've not been putting in that cardio, and you want to cover ground, not in a vehicle for bears, then absolutely, I think it's, I'm not going to say you should be preparing for it, because I don't think very many people put bears first. Like, it's a nice to have, right? Like, I'm going to get out there, I'm going to have a good time. Hopefully put some meat in the freezer, maybe save a few fawns or calves or whatever, and just want to get out, right? It's a really great time to obviously start training, but to start testing your gear, right? Your boots, your pants, your whatever. Because, I saw one of Barklow's posts come up the last day or two, and he was saying that, and he said this every year, and it's a term I think I've stolen from him, but the notion of like a dynamic environment, and spring is really good for that, right? Like, you can get 20 degrees Celsius, 25 degrees Celsius, warmer some days. I mean, shoot, we had almost 25 degrees Celsius here, like in Kelowna, 2-3 days ago, right? Yeah. And the next morning it's 5 degrees. And if you get up high, you could be in a snow squall or sleet or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So it's in many ways, it's more dynamic than the fall. Like, sure, you can get a warm fall day, but you're generally not going to get as Barklow puts it, as dynamic an environment as you do in the spring. So I'm getting off on a tangent, obviously, surprise, surprise. But I think there's 2 elements to training, right? And that's another, maybe I won't say big shift, but a pretty important shift in my mindset is, lots of people will roll their eyes at the notion of training to hunt, right? And at the end of the day, if you have a decent level of physical fitness, whatever it is that you're doing, there's a point at which you should probably shift some focus to, whatever it is that you need to do. I wrote a piece on this, I think it was last year, right? Like, does being fit make you a better hunter? And the answer is, like many things in life, it depends.
Right.
If you're fit enough to get wherever you need to get for whatever it is that you're chasing, putting even more time into fitness or training at the same level, once that base is there and that competency is there, and not paying attention to whatever it might be, your elk calling, your shooting with you, whatever your weapon is.
Yeah, good point.
Fieldcraft, whatever, that great big basket of stuff of, being able to handle a shitty situation in the backcountry. Spring's just such a great time for that, because you're going to get challenging conditions, if you're out there enough. And there's just not the pressure with bears. It's not like, okay, this is my one chance to get a big buck, a big bull, or a ram, or whatever it might be. You can always get back out. And if you're really like jonesing to cut that bear tag, then, hop in a truck or on a quad and crawl some roads in a high density area, and you're going to find one. Is it going to be, the giant bear you're looking for, or, hope to get? Maybe not, but odds are you can find a bear to put in the salt and put some meat in the freezer, So
Yeah.
I don't know if that really answers your question per se, but
yeah, no, it definitely does, man. Those are really good points. And I think for me, one of the main drivers to be in shape is, it's the safety aspect. Cause I think for both of us, even if it's just bear hunting, I think we're thinking about doing backpack style hunts, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, you might have the endurance to get in there, but when you come out heavy with something on your back, you can fuck yourself up in a hurry and get yourself into a bad situation if you're not.
Yeah. Well, and I think the layer beneath that, right? Because I've said that plenty. I completely agree. Right? Like, to me, like, fitness equates to safety when it comes to the backcountry, and shit. Like, at the end of the day, like, general life, like, you drive your vehicle off the road in the winter, and you're in the middle of nowhere, and you have no cell service. Welcome to many parts of Western North America.
Yeah,
you're probably walking somewhere, or hiking somewhere, but I think the layer beneath that is fitness gives you a buffer, right? So if you've got, you end up finding a giant bear and you're like, heck yeah, I want to keep this hide and all the meat. And, that's a pretty heavy ruck on your back. Well, if you're like just barely surviving, your chances of rolling an ankle or twisting a knee or just falling over or maybe knocking your head. Like, again, like, these are things that none of us want to have happen and probably don't happen all that often, but you blow a knee, you blow an ankle, and sure, you can probably tough it out. But if that means you're hiking through the night, and like, again, that preparation, like, training is, yes, it's fitness to me, but it's also some of these other aspects of preparation, if we want to call it that I think just fitness really, really helps with. Right? I'll give a perfect example of this. Maybe not a perfect example, but an interesting example, right? I've been down to the Sorinex Winter Strong event a couple times now. It's been going for, I think they're in their 10th year now. And it's really interesting, right? Because it attracts a lot of fairly fit people. And this is, this could be a thread we pull on, right? But like, people who can crush the weight room.
Yeah.
Maybe some CrossFit workouts, some road running and stuff like that. Well, Bert hosts this on what they call the Sorinex farm. And it's this huge property. And they've got these like really sandy, like, basically back roads, interwoven throughout the property. And last time we were down there, they run this event at the end of the event itself. This like physical event called, is it called Lift Run Shoot? Might even be called Lift Run Shoot. So maybe Cam Hames stole that from him. I don't know. But it's like a team. There's shooting with the bows. There's some lifting, and then there's some cardio, right? So basically, Lift Run Shoot.
Yeah.
And the last time I was down there 2 years ago, the bow targets, like the 3D targets, were set up throughout the property, but off the main trails. And there's some pretty challenging shots there. And the task was, if a person hit inside the vitals, that on the first shot, the team goes and grabs the arrow together. They put the arrow back in the quiver and they run to the next station, whatever that station may be. And so there's these different, shooting, these different targets and shooting opportunities mixed throughout the course. Well, you're going off the trails to go and run and grab these arrows. And the 2 times I've been down there, and Wardo went down another time, and he said the same thing. These people, as soon as they get off the trail, like, oh, watch your ankles. Like, oh no, like, look out, da-da-da. And I'm not like judging. I'm just saying, if all you ever do is treadmill, road, sidewalk, etc., and you are a backcountry hunter or want to be a backcountry hunter, I can understand like the hesitation around like rolling your ankle or something like that. But if you expose yourself to those uneven surfaces, like, we're not talking this was like some plowed or tilled field where you could legitimately break an ankle. This was like stuff that a person that trail runs or rucks regularly like wouldn't even think about, And so when we talk about training, there's training, and then there's fitness, I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
And then there's training, right? And training is for a purpose, for a race, for an event, for whatever it is, a goal. Fitness is, I'm just moving my body and doing things, which is great, right? Like, that's fantastic. But there's more to what you can do with that fitness. And that's, to me, that transition to training is when it's serving a specific purpose.
Yeah, man. And for me, like, I hate the gym. I can't focus. It's like, it's torture for me, just mental torture. I can't stand it. So trail running is like, that's kind of my baseline. I'm just almost pretty much every day out there trail running, right? And that has worked well for me. That combined with yoga and just basic body weight training at home, just nothing too crazy, right? But that stuff has worked out well for me because, if you're on the trail, it kind of applies to hunting, right? So there's
Absolutely
definitely that. And then some backpack training and stuff like that, just getting used to weight. But beyond that, I don't do a whole lot in the gym.
Yeah. Well, and that's, look, we had a training program for mountain hunting, right?
Yeah.
I had a few cracks at that over the years. And in my opinion, there is a not in great, English here, but a righter way to do that than not.
Right.
However, the perfect program that you don't like to do, that you won't do because you don't have the equipment or you won't go to the gym or whatever it is worthless.
Right.
So the point I'm trying to make here is, you hear, if you've, whatever, listen to or follow enough fitness stuff, is I'm on my own fitness journey. And it sounds all annoying.
Yeah.
But it is really true, right? Like I remember it was years back, you were talking to Lander about exactly this mix, right? And he had made a transition to yoga and had said it had had a big impact positively on his ability to get out there. And he's, older than both of us and has got a lot of miles on his body. And the key is like finding what works for you, right? And the only way you do that is experimenting, right? And the gym is not for everybody, right? We've heard that for years from the hunting community. Like, I just don't want to go into those four walls or whatever it is and deal with the meatheads and the gym shark wearing, people just, spending so much time doing selfies between sets that I can't get like a good workout in. Like I get all that stuff. Some people love the gym.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. So the point is like, you got to find what makes you want to keep going back, because that's going to lead to sustainable long-term results and success and the ability to do this sort of stuff, well into your older years.
Yeah, for sure, man. You mentioned you're training for a race, which is cool because that's kind of what keeps me motivated. I sign up for like all the Interior Running Association stuff, the 10Ks and that. So it's just a little motivation in the back of my mind. Not that I want to go and win them or anything. It's just kind of, they're fun to do and it keeps you active. What are you training for?
Well, the Wild Horse 52K
nice.
run. Yeah.
Sweet.
It's been a very long time since I've gone long, although these days 52 kilometers is not even considered long. It's
right.
It's like the buy-in, right? To go real long. But the start of that race is like 10 minutes away from my house.
Yeah.
I love Okanagan Mountain Park. You know that.
Yeah.
Anyone that's close to me knows that. I've got this fascination, appreciation, relationship even with the park.
100%. Yeah, I agree.
And I've always wanted to do this race. So for those listening that know BC's geography, you basically run from the south end of Kelowna all the way through to Naramata, through Okanagan Mountain Park. You finish on some like fire roads in the Kettle Valley Railway. So you're out of the park eventually, and you start a little bit out of the park, but it's not long before you're into it. I've never done the race. I've always wanted to. And a good buddy of mine was, he was the guy I started doing long distance running with. Geez, a long time ago. 2008 was the first long run we did. So what's that? 16 years. And he's really kept it up. And I kind of went away from long distance trail running, but he just reached out and was like, dude, happy birthday and Merry Christmas. You're doing 52 kilometers.
Oh, nice.
Because it's not an inexpensive sign up fee. So a meaningful gift, but I was kind of like, oh shit. Like I was not in run shape when he sent me that message, but it's been great to get back to it, man. Like to your point, there is nothing that clears my mind like a trail run. Just nothing. And I done a bunch of different things, fitness wise, just kind of, grit through and guts through most of it. But trail running is one of those ones where like I never, sure, you got some sore spots and aches and pains, blah, blah, blah. But mentally, like I never feel worse after than I do going into it. And I don't know what it is. Like I did not grow up a runner. Like I did not. Like I remember in grade school, we used to have benchmarks to hit. At least we did in Ontario. There was like once a year they would do, I think it was a 1,600 meter run. There was a shuttle run. There were push-ups. It was kind of like almost like classic, not boot camp, but basic like human fundamental fitness testing they used to do. It was in the school system. And I was a pretty chubby kid until like grade 6. And then I went to like 6'1" in grade 7 and have been around this weight since. But I wasn't, my power to weight ratio, let's say, or endurance to weight ratio wasn't great. And I just dreaded it. Like I hated running, hated it with a passion. And then obviously found it later in life and got in particular. Like I could care less about ever running a stride on concrete or pavement ever again in my life.
Yeah.
But on the trails, it's, I don't know what it is. There's just something to it.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree and get it, man. I don't know what it is either, but I think I was telling you that where I used to run was burned last year in the fire. It's one of the spots where it jumped over.
That's right. Yeah.
And I just was like devastated, man, like mourning the loss of this place because it's closed. You can't go in there.
Yeah.
And fuck, man, it really messed with my mental health for a while. Like, what am I going to do? Because I go there every day, right? So I've since found another trail close that's, not as good as that one, but it's become an important part of your routine and your mental health, man.
Oh yeah. And especially, I mean, coming back to like the things that you want to do, therefore you do more consistently, therefore you see results, therefore you do more it's that positive snowball effect, right? When you have like a break in that, a loss in that, something gets closed or there's too much snow, right? Like that's the thing that really set me back on cardio the last few years is I guess at the end of the day, I just kind of got a little lazy. Yeah. And, the roads would be runnable long before the trails would be, but like, I just wouldn't want to do it.
I know.
And so, and then the other thing I want to say with trail running, like, look, I already said, you got to find what kind of floats your boat and double down on that. Cause it's going to produce the results and there's going to be consistency and sustainability to it. But there's no question at least in my opinion, that running, like, in terms of like return on minutes put into it will get you the most ready for the backcountry. And yes, you absolutely have to do some rucking in there. You've got to get your body used to weight on, your chassis, on your body. Yeah. But because there's more impact with running, because, you are testing yourself in the cardiovascular system a little bit more, you're just that much more ready, right? You'd have to, if you're only rucking, you'd have to ruck a lot more, like over a much longer time frame to have that really solid base endurance to go into the mountains for an extended hunt than if you had some running mixed in there. And that's not me saying everybody should run. I know there's lots of people that can't or won't or whatever it is. But for those who maybe do and dabble, but they're like, oh no, like I need to ruck more come, May, June, whatever it is, I would say don't necessarily run more, but keep the running up because it gets those legs damned ready, man.
Yeah, man.
For just going and going and going and going and going and going and going.
Yeah, then it's more fun when you're out there. You're not the guy at the back that's dying.
Exactly.
You don't want to be that guy.
Yeah, I've been that guy. I've been that guy for a couple of years because, my cardio wasn't where it needed to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. When is the race?
It's in a month this weekend,
oh,
May 4th. Yeah. It's usually most years it's held the first weekend in June. This year they bumped it back a month. I don't know if that was heat. Like they've had some like stinking hot days for some of those, for some of the years, which, really, really nails people hard. So I don't know if that's why they moved it a month early or whatever, but should be, coming back to our conversation about spring, I don't know if it's going to be 27 degrees Celsius or 7 degrees Celsius that morning when we show up at the start line.
Yeah,
right.
You never know.
But I like those. Like, I never like, you were saying earlier, right? Like I don't race to race. Like I don't do short races. I've done a couple way back when they were fun, but like this will be a test for me. Like I'm going to be sliding into home base, barely ready for this thing. In terms of the volume I need to put in to prepare. So there's a question mark, right? Like, am I gonna be able to finish? Am I gonna seize up? Am I gonna cramp up? Is it, what's gonna happen? For some weird reason that appeals to me versus like if it's whatever 10K or something like that. And I'm not, diminishing running a hard 10K because we both know that is hard as hell.
Yeah.
But I like that question mark, right? And that was the only thing that ever attracted me to longer races. Like I did 250 milers years and years ago. Like with that distance or even longer, because that's now like 100 miles isn't even like noteworthy anymore, right?
Yeah,
It's
crazy.
250K and that sort of thing. But what attracted me to that was like you never, ever, ever ran in a single run more than maybe 50% of the distance you're going to run in a 50 miler. Like there was just this like, you're going to find out. You're going to find out on race day. Like, can you do it? Will you get through it? Will you not? And I think there's really great carryover to backcountry hunting with that. And in life in general, let's be honest, but in particular, like a 7+ day backcountry hunt, there's a lot of question marks.
There
are you going
is,
to find something? Are you going to be able to get it out? Is the weather going to cooperate? Like all these things. And so I like that element of this race and running long.
That's cool, man. Well, if you decide to do it next year, give me a heads up. I'd like to do that one. I knew about it because I know you'd mentioned it years ago, but I just have never heard about signing up for it. So
it sells out like literally in 20 or 30 minutes.
Does it?
It opens up sometime in Jan. Like I said, my buddy signed me up.
Yeah.
But it opens up sometime in Jan and it sells out damn quick.
How many?
I think that's a great question. 150, maybe 200 people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's a pretty, big race, well respected in the trail running community for being well run, right? And meaning, like, let's be honest, at the end of the day, well run means the course is well marked and the aid stations, there's actually somebody there with some stuff for you to nibble on.
Nice.
Because there's a lot of races out there that, people, bless their hearts, do their best, but they screw it up.
Yeah.
Right. And people get lost, or there's, they didn't order enough, whatever gels, and that person shows up, they're at the, the back half of the pack, and they show up and there's like, oh, I got nothing here and I was counting on it. And that's the other thing with this race is I only think there's 2, maybe 3 aid stations, and they're very clear. Like you have to be self-sufficient to do this, which again appeals to me. It's like this is training for hunting for me. Like it's yes, there's all sorts of whatever added benefits of being basically forced to run more than I normally would at this time of year and get back into it and all that sort of stuff. But I'm not racing a race. I'm racing to finish. Hopefully, probably have to deal with the body not cooperating, maybe the gut's not cooperating. Certainly my head will not cooperate at some point mentally. And that's all good. That's a good training day.
Yeah, man.
In my opinion.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, you have to keep me posted on how you do.
Well, depends on the result.
If I don't hear anything,
if it's DNF, you can assume that you won't hear from me. I'll be too embarrassed.
Nice.
But yeah.
Hey, since we mentioned Okanagan Mountain Park and anybody in the Okanagan, Thompson, Nicola, rattlesnakes. How do you feel about snakes?
I don't have a problem with snakes. No? Like my wife, like she can't even see a picture. If she's like just thumbing through social and somehow a snake picture comes up, she literally screams and throws her phone. Like I'm not one of those people. And you and I have talked plenty about this, but I've had a lot of rattlesnake encounters in Okanagan Mountain Park.
Yeah, likewise.
And there's no question, like we're all human, and somewhere deep down in our, monkey brains, there's a like, oh God moment. But other than Toby's encounter, which we get into here, I've never felt like threatened by one. I mean, admittedly, like I see one. This is again why I find the park so fascinating, and I'll admit there's part of me that wants to reach out to the race organizers and do a little spiel at the beginning and say, like, people, hope you know how special this place is. Like, you've got mule deer, elk, moose, California bighorn sheep, mountain goats, wolves, coyotes, black bears, rattlesnakes. I couldn't even go through all the list of raptors, meaning, birds of prey, not to mention all the songbirds. I'm no birder. Oh, I forgot to say cougars. Plenty of cougars. I'm sure there's lynx and bobcat too. There's obviously grouse. I saw a huge blue grouse actually just last week. Not in Okanagan Mountain Park in Myra, but it is an incredibly biodiverse place. And then we're obviously talking about the rattlesnakes, and like it's a really, really, maybe not unique, because I'm sure there's other places like it, but it's a pretty special place that, you could say is extra special or is maybe more at risk because of its proximity to both Kelowna and Ticton. And I don't know if you've heard, but there's lots of talk about paving the road between the two up and over, like using the KVR and stuff like that, right? And so what's that going to do to the park? It's already busier than it's been since we moved here. And yes, of course, Kelowna's grown and all that sort of stuff. But anyways, I'm getting off on demographics, I guess, when we should be talking about snakes and those sort of things. But no, they certainly don't bother me. It's not like being in grizzly bear country in terms of my mindset, in terms of like that hyper awareness of just like, don't slack off, like, keep your head on your shoulders. But there is an element of that, I'm not paying attention to where my feet fall on the trail when I'm in there, because I was saying to you on text there, I would guess I'm somewhere around a 50% hit rate on time in park and encounters with rattlers.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to bring it up, man, because it was pretty sporadic, and I've always spent a lot of time in the park. Maybe would see one in a season, but now it seems like they're crawling all over the place in there. Have you noticed a pretty big jump?
Yeah, I don't know, man. That's hard for me to say. I guess, yes, it would have increased those interactions or encounters, whatever you want to call them. But I would say it wasn't that long into my, the beginnings of me really starting to explore the park where that kind of became the norm.
Right.
So, and I have no idea, right? Like, you're asking me, like, I wonder if there are more. And I don't even know how well we study.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't.
That, right? Like, do we even have data on that to say, is this a natural evolution of, the park, for those that don't know, burned almost pretty close to probably all of it in 2003.
Yeah.
So, we're 21 years in now. And is this just a natural byproduct of more, that's why there's more snakes and, more, probably lots of other things too, at least that you can see? Or is it just that you can see them because they're forced to use, trails and parts of the park that otherwise were better habitat, or was better habitat for them? Like, I don't know. I don't know anything about snakes.
The reason was, so last year I was in there hiking. I saw 6 in one day.
Wow.
Yeah. And I had never, lucky to see one in previous years. Right. And then, like I said, it kind of gradually see more and more of them. It's 6 in one day. Yeah. So, I don't love snakes. I think it's cool that they're there. Mm-hmm. And it's more like in the back of my mind, like, fuck, it's rattlesnakes, man. Like, I don't want to see a rattle. But then when you see them, you're like, oh, they're cool and they're very docile, right? As long as you're not messing around with them, they're not going to come after you. But the thing that makes me nervous is going in there with the dog. He comes with me all the time. Mm-hmm. And which is kind of a good segue to the legendary GSP Toby. I figured you should.
May he rest in peace.
Yeah. How long ago was that he had his?
Oh, geez. I'd have to go back and look at my photos. It was probably, I don't know, 5-6 years ago would be my guess.
Yeah.
But before we get to that story, just to touch on your point about, running into them and them being docile, I'll share the story about, maybe we don't need to say his name.
Oh, so we can say it. I know what you're talking about.
Art, I don't know if Art listens to the podcast, but Art and I like to have our fun with Hart, who's been on the podcast a few times, and I think you've met Hart now, right, Mike? Hart is an easy target, so he takes a thrashing from Art and I, but now it's Art's turn, and so poor Art. I convinced him to come for a day hunt, which should have been an overnight, and I wanted to go off trail. Art was like, hell yeah, I'm in, man. And so we do the hike up to sort of the entry point, basically the end of one trail, and then we're going off trail. And admittedly, like, I didn't give him a heads up about the snakes at all. Didn't think of it.
Yeah.
And you don't lead a conversation with, hey man, are you afraid of snakes? But we hiked through this area, and it was a combination of factors. We were probably getting pretty close to high noon, early afternoon. Sun's just baking down on these bluffs, which are just littered with these rock shelves where the snakes will go to the shade when they want to, or come out and get onto the heat. It's almost, shit, man, you could probably fry an egg on some of these slabs, right? So I'm a little ahead of Art, and he's hiking, and we kind of come up and over this sort of bluffy knoll, and then we're hiking down, which is this benched rocky zone. And I guess he puts his hand down and just starts hearing. And I didn't know this had happened, right? And I was exaggerating. He didn't actually squeal like a girl or a child, but I'd stopped and he comes hiking up to me and Art's a sweater. Okay. So he's always sweaty, but he was like extra sweaty at this point. And his hat's kind of like cocked off to the side. Like he just kind of looked a little disheveled, And he's like, dude, are there rattlesnakes in here? I'm like, well, yeah, man. Like, and he's like, you just like expletives out at the yin yang of, you didn't tell me that. He's like, I just put my hand down on this rock because I'm like, he's using 4 points of contact to get down this sort of steep thing and just running into this rattlesnake just sitting there. And he was non-pleased about that. But yeah, I mean, and nothing came of it. Nothing happened to it. And I was like, and he's like, are they poisonous? And my understanding is these are northern Pacific rattlesnakes, which are not poisonous. Or sorry, they're not lethal.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
It will suck really bad,
right? If
you get tagged, and you may or may not be able to ambulate after that, depending on if they got you in the calf muscle or the shin or something like that. But then this is a good segue into Toby. But this is what I learned with Toby, right? Is it was a non-lethal bite,
right?
And it was a good bite. Like he had venom in him. But and we'll get to where that venom resided. But anyways, I was saying to Art, like, they're not going to kill you, man. Like it's going to hurt a lot.
It's going to ruin your day for sure.
I might have to hike out and get your airlifted out. Like I don't know, but like what's the big deal? And he was not very pleased. But yeah, be mindful, right? At the end of the day, like I think that's the thing is if you're going to traipse around in parts where there are rattlesnakes you mentioned up and towards Kamloops, etc. You should be aware, or down even further south, of course, closer to Osoyoos. I mean, they're there. They're there for sure. And they you just gotta be mindful and think about. I mean, it's funny, right? In a way, it's a hunting mindset. Where are they likely to live? Where are they likely to hang out?
Yeah.
Where are they likely to hide away from the main heat of the day, or how are they going to behave later in the day? Like all those sort of things. That's one extra thing to think about when you go into some of these some of these zones.
All right, Toby.
Oh, I missed that dog.
Yeah.
So we anyone that's got a GSP, Vizsla, Weim, or any working dog breed is.
It's going to say we share a love-hate relationship with the pointer breed.
Yeah. Well, but you also know like they're not like, especially in like a hiking type scenario, like they're not healed at your side most of the time, right? Like they're busy. They're doing stuff. So he's like probably classic GSP, certainly classic Tobes was I'd go for 30, 45 minutes, not see him. And then he'd come and check back in.
Yeah.
And I learned, much later than he would have liked, but eventually that I just needed to get comfortable with that versus expecting him to stay, basically in sight. So he'd been bird dogging around, chasing marmots, chasing grouse, chasing any bird he managed to find. So I thought nothing of it when he's up ahead of me. We're now on this it's basically a service road, but it's a trail. And it's a pretty steep incline. So he's, kind of just over the height of land. Like I can just kind of see him. And he's doing his bird dog thing. We are not 5 minutes from the truck at this point. And all of a sudden I see him go into that low crouch, like almost like that tiger stalk, right? But quick. And I'm like, another marmot. And that dude is like a Terminator when it comes to, or was the Terminator when it comes to marmots. He's brought me so many dead marmots, been like, look, Dad, look what I got. Like, Jesus, you just kind of kick it off to the side, right? Yeah. Anyway, so I don't think anything of it. And then he's moving while I'm moving. So I just happen to hike or keep walking far enough ahead that I can see a little bit more. And as he's angling down towards this, what turns out to be a rattlesnake, this thing launches out of the trail, like at him. And this was, memories aren't perfect, but this was at least a 4 to 5, maybe even 6 foot snake. Like this was a big rattlesnake. Right? Most of the ones I've seen have been like, foot, maybe 2, right? A few babies, here and there. This thing just launches at him, and in a testament to Toby's and most GSP's athleticism. So he'd kind of come from behind it down the slope. It obviously keyed into what was happening. He was smart enough to not, or maybe not smart enough. He tried to wrap around in front of it So on the like downhill side from the snake now, and that's when this thing launches at him, and he somehow does this acrobatic like jumps and spins, and in so doing opens up his like his tummy and undercarriage, I guess. So I see this and I go running up, and this thing's coiled up in the middle of the trail, it is pissed off, and Toby's on point. Just his tail is just like dead straight and just vibrating. And I'm like, he's going to get hit. If he hasn't been hit already, he's going to get hit again. So I grab him by the collar, pull him off, of course, unwilling, because he's like, dude, I've pointed this thing. Like, let's do something here.
Yeah.
And get him far enough away. The snake stays there for a while. I guess it must have been a mom. I don't know if snakes are paternal or maternal, because there's actually a couple of babies on the trail too.
Interesting.
So maybe it was protecting its young, not just itself. Anyways, I get him far enough away, and I start like going over his body looking for a bite. And if you know GSPs, Weims, and Vizslas, there's not a lot of fur there. Like it's pretty easy to find an injury. Don't say anything. I'm like, man, like of course Toby like dodges a friggin' bullet, like nearly literally. So I get back to the truck. We've been out for a while, like 4+ hours. So he's gassed. I think it was in June. It had been a hot day. And so he kind of like limps into the back of the truck. And I don't think anything of it. Like, he's tired.
Yeah.
We get back to the house, and it's a hard time making it up the stairs. Our house, for those listening, is a walk up. So up to the main floor, kitchen, etc., is going up a set of stairs. And again, I'm like, he's just tired. And I'm in the kitchen making some food. And again, if you know your pointing breeds, they don't really do much slow.
Yeah.
Right. Like if they walk into a room, it's with purpose.
Yeah.
It's either they're up and moving quickly, or they're like in the most funny, like KO'd position you've ever seen. Yeah. Right. And I just hear this, like his claws, like step. And I'm like, that's weird. I look around, and he's kind of got this, like his ears are like almost tucked down and under his chin. He's kind of looking up at me like with this very sheepish look. He's kind of like a little frothy at the mouth. And I'm like, oh no. And I'm looking, I'm like, where the heck? I just can't see anything. And then all of a sudden I notice there's drops of blood on the floor. And I look under, and the rattler had bit him on the tip of his penis. And it looks like a golf ball.
Oh no.
And it's dripping blood. And so, part of the story I didn't share is, I was, when we got back in the truck, I called our vet, because I was like, I don't even know what to look for here. Like, it's possible he's hit, somewhere, say back in like the rump, where it might be harder to see the bite. Right. What I didn't know, like, would it swell up? Yada, yada, yada. And, so they're like, you're going to know, like you're going to see the bite. It's going to get very swollen. It's probably going to bleed, blah, 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 blah. But again, I'd looked and seen nothing. And lo and behold, he got bit in the penis. And so I called the vet. They're like, we can't do that. You got to go to this, this one 24-hour emergency vet clinic here in town. Call them, check that they've got an anti-venom and all that stuff. And like, yeah. And kind of the funniest part of the story is we get there, I load him up right away. We go down there, and he's obviously now in pretty severe pain.
Yeah.
And it's a busy place. Like, again, it's the only 24-hour emergency vet clinic in the city, or was at the time. So it's busy, and we go to check in, and Toby's not walking very well. And people are kind of half paying attention. You're sitting there in a waiting room, like, what else are you doing?
Yeah.
And the like admin staff are like, oh, is this the one that got bit by the rattlesnake in the penis? And the entire waiting room was like, oh, it was like he was on stage or something. Everyone, like, and every dude in the clinic is just like doing like the old, like, you see somebody get kicked in the nuts, right?
Yeah,
You're like, oh God, like everybody kind of feels it. And so he was kind of famous for a day. And yeah, this is how I found out that non-lethal, and maybe a somewhat sad part of the story, but to your point about you love and hate these dogs.
Yeah.
My wife and I had a conversation before this. Like, we were certain he was going to either kill himself doing something stupid, or end up with like a blown knee or something like that. And so we'd set a budget beyond which we would not spend.
Right.
And we would just have to say goodbye.
Right.
And that might sound harsh, but to those listening, if you ever want to know the full story of Tobes, let's get together for a couple of days and I'll tell you everything. And then you'll see why we landed at that decision. So I called Julia and I had called her on the way to the vet. And she was like, just remember, there's the limit, right? And part of me was like, it's a good death. Like, I mean, let's be honest. That's a pretty legendary way to go out. Good ass, hike that day, loving being a pointer, tries to get after a rattler, and, his day had come.
Yeah.
So I wasn't hoping for that, but I thought like, well, it's better than, getting hit by a vehicle or attacked by a bear or a cougar or something like that, or just getting lost and disappearing.
Yeah.
Like at least there's like, it was, kind of like at the end of Legends of the Fall, it was a good death. And, anyways, that's when the vet's like, no, he's going to be fine. He's just going to be in an immense amount of pain for the next 7 to 10 days.
Jeez.
And I was like, okay, well, what does that look like? Well, we got to do anti-venom. We got to do this. Oh, and here's the other part of the story. Toby, I swear to God, he had 20 million lives. They give him the anti-venom. He's got the cone because they put a fentanyl patch on him. They're like, do not. I didn't know what fentanyl was back then.
Right.
Most of us have now heard of it and how dangerous it is.
Yeah.
And they're like, whatever you do not let him lick around that fentanyl patch because if he eats it, it's going to kill him. And, I get him home and I go down to the office. He's got his cone on and I kept the door open just so I could hear if he's whining or anything like that. I can hear this commotion. I come up and he had licked the fentanyl patch off.
Jesus.
Somehow got his way out of the cone, but he just like kind of like flung it with his tongue versus ate it.
Oh, jeez.
Right. So it's like, he's got the rattlesnake bite in his unit and then he almost eats a fentanyl patch all in the span of like, I don't know, a few hours.
Jesus.
He lived a long life after that, but
maybe it was the venom that kept him going for so long.
Who knows, right? Spirit of the rattlesnake was strong in him, but it was. I mean, I guess in hindsight, we've been talking about snakes a bunch here. It was a very educational experience, and probably part of why, I'm not flippant about getting bit by a snake.
And that's kind of why I wanted to bring this up.
But at the same time, it was like, I'd never put the time into like, what kind of rattlesnakes do we have here? And I don't even know if they're the same here, like in the park as they have in Soyuz or up in Kamloops. Like I believe there are legit diamondbacks.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Which I don't know if they're like lethal without like, they might be lethal without, reasonably immediate medical treatment. Right. I have no idea. But and again, coming back to preparation, and I actually was just thinking about this in the last week or so, like, you go into the park solo, I go into the park solo. Yeah. I know I'm not going to die, but if I can't hike my ass out because, my calf muscle is completely blown up and in excruciating pain.
Yeah.
Might be handy to have some anti-venom on hand to just, I don't know if it's oral or an injection.
I don't know.
But, something like that to have, coming back to, again, that preparation and having the right things in your kit. I carry an EpiPen because I had that weird anaphylactic reaction years and years and years ago as a bit of a safety net. And, but I don't carry some of these other things that probably are nearly as important. So again, good learning opportunity at Toby's expense. And, luckily for him, breeding was never part of the plan. So whatever loss of function he might've had was immaterial.
Yeah. Nice. Cool, man. Well, in the last little stretch here, Adam, I want to talk about bear hunting because that was the original plan. We kind of went off on a different direction here for a bit. But last week, you guys put up a repost from Nolan and Jared, yeah. So tons of good info in that one. So there might be a little bit of, same info that we're going to cover here. But I thought this would be good for my listeners to just kind of go over some of this stuff, especially if it's their first time going on a bear hunt. There's lots of things to think about. And it was cool, man. We had Renee Thornton on the podcast a couple weeks back. And in great detail, she explained her first hunt, which was a black bear hunt. That was her first harvest too. Yeah. And it got me really pumped up. And she was saying, it's like a black bear hunt is actually a really great first hunt. I mean, if something's going to boost your confidence and something that's very accessible because you can backpack, you can go out on a quad or you can a truck or whatever and cruise the FSR. So it's actually a very accessible hunt to do, right?
I agree. Yeah, I fully agree.
So anyways, just talking to her got me pretty excited about it. And especially the detail she gave about, just being out there was cool, and all the emotions you go through when you harvest your first bear and that. But bears are a funny thing, man, because I mean, it's pretty obvious people don't understand it, first of all, right? The general public. And I think a lot of new hunters are hesitant for the first time.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting you bring up the hesitation, because I was like that.
Yeah, me too.
And not, I'll be honest, like when I first moved to BC, which is almost 20 years ago now, hunting BC was like the number one thing you read or tried to get intel and information off of, which, was a bit of a dumpster fire at times. And I believe it is more of that now, but I haven't been on it in a long, long time. But there was a lot of people saying you couldn't eat them. And I wasn't like a hardcore, like I'm not hunting if I can't eat it. Just, there's a disconnect for me there.
Yeah.
I guess at the end of the day, I just didn't understand it well enough to the point of what you're saying. And I had a buddy that was newer to big game hunting, had done a lot of like birds and waterfowl and really wanted to get into big game and was mostly interested in the classic things, deer and elk and moose. But he really pushed on bears and kind of the tipping point, which I think it often is for a lot of people that haven't grown up doing it, is, well, it's just an excuse to get out.
Yeah.
You don't ever have to pull the trigger if you don't want to. But it's a damn good excuse to get out. And I'd much rather, now in hindsight, chase bears than turkeys, because hunting bears, coming back to training and preparation, is a lot more like hunting some other big game species than, I haven't hunted turkeys a ton, so this may not be a perfect way to put it, but it's hunting turkeys is not as much like hunting muleys or elk or moose. Sure, you got to call for turkeys and blah, blah, blah. But it's really good preparation. It's really good. It's a really good way to test. Are you comfortable spending a night out there? Are you comfortable packing meat out? If you're going to do a backpack style, and if not, it's like you said, it's very accessible. Right. The beauty of bears is you can hunt them from FSRs, or you can make it as hard as you want it to make want to make it. And so, my buddy convinced me to get out. It turned out that I loved being in, the backcountry at this time of year.
Yeah.
And then, kind of the fascination set in of like, these things are so cool to watch.
Yeah.
They are different, right? Like there's something different to hunting a predator versus or at least, mostly a predator, although omnivore, obviously. Yeah. But there's something different to hunting them than hunting, a deer, an elk,
absolutely,
a moose.
Yeah.
And, I eventually did find out that, of course, they're perfectly edible. And in fact, it's great meat. With some exceptions, there can be, but I've had some really shitty elk and moose meat and deer meat too. So once I went the first time, like that was it. Like I've hunted bears every single spring for now almost 20 years, and won't stop anytime soon. And then the other thing too is, you talked about accessibility. I remember having this debate with Ranella years ago, back before we had the podcast. I did these written interviews.
Right.
Well, I would like interview them and then we would turn that into a written article. It's called Blazing Trail, and you can still find it on the Journal of Mountain Hunting site.
Cool.
But I had said to Ranella exactly what you said to me. Like, I think it's the most accessible hunt in the West, let's say. I don't know if that really necessarily applies in the East, but definitely in the West. And he really disagreed, because he felt because of that X factor to bears that people have a hard time with. They're obviously the cute and cuddly factor. And can you eat them? Can you not eat them? Et cetera, et cetera. But he felt strongly otherwise. He felt like that should be one of the last species you hunt once you get into hunting.
Interesting.
And I fully agree with you and fully disagree with him that that's not, to me, true, because your odds of success are pretty high, much higher than finding a mature buck or a mature, bull elk or something like that. You don't have to go nearly as far, depending on where you live, of course. But if you want to go and hunt moose, if you live in BC and you aren't banking on an LEH tag, you better hop in that truck and burn some gas and maybe even get flown in somewhere to go and get a moose. So it's very, very accessible. Odds of success are high. So you're going to get something for the time, energy, effort put in.
Yeah.
you're going to get exposure to field dressing. And, what I started to say there is, for me now with my boys at 10 and 8 years old, I can't take them on a sheep hunt.
Right.
I can't take them on a hardcore elk hunt. I can take them on an elk hunt, or I could take them on a deer hunt for sure. But I can definitely take them on a bear hunt.
Yeah.
Right. Like if I'm like, I don't really feel like going for a backpack today, we can hop on the truck and crawl roads for an afternoon, and we might get something. Probably will at least see something.
For sure. So
I think there's just so many positives to bear hunting. And it should be said that by taking a bear, any bear, so I'm not saying just big ones, but any bear is, I'm not going to say controlling the population, because I don't think we're having enough of an impact to say that that's the case in terms of the number of bear hunters, at least in BC. But you're definitely saving some fawns and calves.
Yeah, for sure.
Like straight up, you are saving fawns and calves. So if you really care about mule deer, and you really care about elk, and you really care about moose, and you're like, nah, I'm not sure on bears, put one down and turn it into some sausage. They make amazing bratwurst.
Yeah.
Or like a jalapeno cheddar bear smoky is delicious.
Yeah.
And you probably saved a handful to a dozen, fawns or calves that year.
Yeah.
And that's doing good work, in my opinion, because we have so many black bears in BC, and most places where you find them, they are very healthy populations.
Yeah.
And again, like I can't really think of a negative to hunting bears. Yes, you can run into ones that are wormy. Yes, if it's one that lives, in a coastal environment, and it's at a time of year, namely fall, when the salmon or other fish are running, or a bigger part of their diet, they're not going to taste as good. Right. But if we're talking spring, man, it's good eating.
Yeah, yeah. There's the two questions that I get we all get is, can you hunt them, and why do you? And then can you eat them, which you've touched on a few times here. Is there any standout things you've done with them that you really enjoyed?
I keep my my game meat stuff pretty simple, mostly because of the family front. I did smoke a ham once, and it was good. I wouldn't, I know guys that that's like one of their favorite pieces of game meat they ever get is a smoked bear ham.
Yeah.
I've done like salami with it, like a big round, like almost like a sandwich meat salami.
Yeah.
That was pretty good. These days, we go through a lot of sausage in the house, so I usually just turn them into bratwurst or like the Smokies or something like that. I'm not Wardo, right? Wardo is Mr. Culinary experimentation. But again, like from a family, and the other thing too that's worth mentioning is, especially in the spring, if it's not a big bear, your meat yield's not that big.
It's surprising, yeah.
Right? It's pretty friggin' surprising. Depending on, your weapon of choice, if you're, using a rifle, you're probably going to have some meat loss. And so by adding, some pork to that to make a sausage, you're actually, you're going to pay for that, obviously, for that actual, extra input. But you're going to get more yield out of it. And so it kind of stretches your efforts out a little bit. And again, like there's not much easier to fire up on the grill or in the pan than a bunch of Smokies or bratwurst and serve really easily. Like that's, we do our best, like not to get into family life here, but we do our best to create some version of a meal plan most weeks.
Yeah.
And then whatever chaos ensues and we forget, and I can pull a pack of sausages out of the freezer and have those cooked and ready on a kind of a moment's notice. So on the family side, they're well liked, well eaten, and
awesome.
And to be honest, like I can't say the same for, like, I don't make elk roasts for the family that don't really like them.
Right.
I'll make pulled elk, but I can throw bear sausages on a plate and no one's gonna say no. So.
Yeah. When Kelly got his bear, I think it was actually you that recommended Lickman's in Kelowna, and they do really good work. I can't remember if we did bratwurst or if it was Smokies, something along those lines. And man, they were incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I know we serve game often for visitors. And I even had people who, kind of the same idea. They're not hunters, but like, oh, you can eat bear. Like, should we eat them? And we serve them, and they're like, these are so good. And I may be completely full of shit here, but I swear there's a different impact to your body eating bear meat than other game. Like I literally feel like warmer after eating like a bunch of bear sausages. There's just like, again, I'm not going to say it's like spiritual or anything like that, but there's something different to it. And maybe it's super dense. I don't know. Your body's got to, break it down. It takes more work to break it down. I have no idea, but I never ever don't want to have bear sausage. In fact, I'm low. And actually, I want to back up too. Like the other thing with bears, coming back to accessibility, and in a way, doing your part to help the mule deer, the elk, the moose, get 2 tags a year in a BC.
Yeah.
And not to get on a soapbox, but as somebody who's been pretty selective with their bears in the last few years, and I haven't been out as much as I would have liked the last 2 springs in particular, been out, but often in a group, and some people that were newer to bear hunting, so we kind of put them first up as shooters, and we just didn't see that many other bears. But I'd had it in my head for a while that I'm going to hold out for a big bear. I've seen a lot of small to medium sized bears get killed. Killed a few myself, but I haven't killed like a big one.
Right.
And so that was kind of my mindset. And then it just kind of dawned on me here on this notion of saving fawns and calves, etc., especially with the 2 tags. I'm not going to kill a Labrador size bear,
right,
and meaning black lab size bear, not the province or territory. What is that actually?
Newfoundland, that's province.
Newfoundland and Labrador, yeah, exactly.
I
mean, I knew Newfoundland was a province. Don't get me wrong. It's Labrador technically, anyways. But I have no interest in killing one that young,
right?
But with the 2 tags, it's especially, and this is the other part of it. Not to kind of jump all over the place, but the last 2 years, I've gone reasonably far away, 6 hours plus away, into an area known for its big bears. And that's all what we all wanted, right? Put a lot of time and effort into just understanding it as much as I could, exploring new areas.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm trying to say here is somebody who fully agrees with age class and being as selective as makes sense for you and your own goals. I think bears are one of those ones where you get a freebie. You get 2 tags. You haven't just burned your 1 tag,
right?
To kill, a young buck, right? Like you shoot your young buck in any buck season in BC, like you're done, right? You're not going to be able to go and get that big 4-pointer if you're able to find one in November. Whereas the bears, you kind of get your buy-in, right? You can knock one down and put some meat in the freezer. And then if you want to keep hunting that spring, great. Or if you want to hold out for a fall bear, hold out for a fall bear.
Yeah.
And they're completely different eating in the fall than they are in the spring.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's a good point, man. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you was about aging bears. Because like we said earlier, it's surprising when you walk up on them. From a distance, you're like, fuck, that looks like a nice bear. It was the same with Kelly's. Then we got up to it. We're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Not oh shit, like we shouldn't have done that. But wow, it's a lot smaller than you think. And that was a spring bear. And so, I mean, if you are trying to find a bigger, older bear, do you feel confident in like seeing one and being like, yeah, that's the one? Or
aging certainly no.
Yeah.
I mean, no.
It's tricky, man.
That might be a little bit unfair. I've got a bear on cam from last year that Wardo ended up pulling this cam for me because he's in the same area.
Okay.
And we coined it the sloth bear because it looked like Sloth from Goonies. Hey, you guys.
Yeah.
Like it literally like one eye is like an inch lower than the other eye.
That's hilarious.
And its ears are all kind of cocked up weird. But it had a very, very like grizzled muzzle, bunch of scars, and
it's an old warrior.
It just kind of looked old.
Yeah.
Right. At the end of the day, like, it's like a dog, right? A dog's muzzle starts to change color and look different. Now that's not a go-to. Like I'm not a bear guide. I'm no super, crazy experienced bear hunter. I've been out a lot, but, I've been pretty casual about it other than going as much as I can. A big one, I've gotten better at that, I guess I would say. And, absolutely. Just like you're like, oh, that's a good bear. It's a good sized bear. And then you walk up to it and you're like, we're not gonna get a lot of meat off this.
Yeah.
This one, but getting good at understanding the other visuals around, like if you're glassing or spotting,
sure,
having a good grasp of that stump they're walking by, or the size of the rock or the tree, that'll give you some sense of scale. You know, the one that I hear a lot from the bear guides is that belly dragging on the ground. You know, that's a big one. You know, length you would think would be easier to figure out, right? Like length is length.
Right.
But you know, that sort of, I don't think terrain association would be the way to put it, but that terrain comparison to think like, okay, like depending on how far away it is, like, I think that's a pretty good sized tree. And that bear looks to be whatever, 4, 5, 6 feet long. But I mean, dude, I know some guys that are very, very avid bear hunters and bear guides, and even they get it wrong sometimes.
Right.
You know, they misjudge. They're tough. They're tough to judge for sure. I mean, I think honestly, like the best thing you can do is if you really want a big one, figure out where the big ones are.
Right.
That's the island, certain parts of the coastal zone.
Sure.
You can find big ones, you know, in a lot of places. But there's other areas that aren't known for their big bears.
Yeah.
And the Okanagan's definitely one of them.
Yeah, true. That's a good point.
But again, coming back, sorry to cut you off, dude, but coming back to age, like that kind of throws the age thing off, because you might say like, it's a medium size, like the bear I killed with Kelly and Chris's son.
Yeah.
And that was a very, very, very old sow. Like that, she was, I mean, I don't know how old she could have lived, but she was old. In hindsight, should have, you know, pulled some teeth or something and tried to get her age, because she was old.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know.
And she was, you know, a decent size. And that was the earliest I've ever killed a bear. That was like mid-May.
Right.
And that was one of those years where we almost wondered if it was too early to be out.
Right.
Right. And so the point being, she hadn't been able to feed for very long, likely, hadn't been able to put some weight back on. But the meat yield was pretty low. Size was medium, but old as could be. Yeah. Like that was a grandma bear for sure, you know. But we didn't know that till we got up there and got our hands on her.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's just part of bear hunting, I guess, man.
Yeah,
you know? Yeah.
Well, but that comes back to my point about like feeling the pressure on age class, or feeling the pressure on big. Like, I get it. Like if you want to get a big one, then put your time in, pass them up, go to areas known for big bears. But especially if you're just getting started, be prepared for ground shrink. It's almost certainly going to happen. Meaning, looks big in the glass or in the rifle scope, and then you walk up to it and you're like, wow, this is a lot smaller than I thought. I mean, I've seen bears that were close to 6 feet curl up into a ball where that would have been as small as Toby curled up, and he was 60 pounds. Yeah. You know, like it was a much bigger animal. And they're just this really unique creature that find ways to make themselves small or make themselves big.
Yeah.
But you know, if you're getting started, don't get wrapped up in age. Don't kill us, you know.
Yeah.
A yearling or a 2-year-old.
You'll know if it's small. Let's put it that way. But
you'll know. And I guess maybe the other thing to say there is really look, right? If it's a snap opportunity on an FSR and it's about to bail into the ditch and disappear, then, you know, do you. But if you have time to look. Yeah. Really pay it, like, even if you got a spotter, pull your spotter out, or get a bunch of if you're with a couple of people, like get everyone on the glass and the binos and looking, and, you know, trying to decide, like, does this look old enough to take? But like, don't get swept up in the big bear side of things. And I don't say that because, again, just to clarify, I'm not all for that. I want to get a really big bear.
Yeah.
But you're not, you know, failing as a hunter by taking a few black bears out of the population and having a positive impact for some other species in, you know, the area you're ideally living in or you're visiting, if that might be the case. Yeah,
no, that's great advice, man. I got a few more questions if you still got time here, just to kind of close things up with bears. Have you done a hide at all? Tan a hide?
Yep.
Yeah. Any tips for skinning? Because it can be pretty intimidating, I think, for the first time. So, you know, Kelly did a pretty good job. He fucked up a couple things. They were able to fix it afterwards. It still ended up getting a nice rug out of it.
Yeah.
But there's good videos and stuff. I mean, I would go and watch some stuff. But any thoughts after doing it a few times?
I mean, nothing that wouldn't apply to. Well, I guess one thing I would say is bear hide's tough.
Yeah.
Right. Really tough. It dulls a knife quicker than anything else I've ever seen, ever. I mean, if anyone listening's broken down, you know, a moose or an elk, the up around their neck and shoulders, which is where they get, stabbed by antlers.
Yeah.
That can be some really thick stuff to work through.
Totally, yeah.
But that isn't anywhere close to what almost all of a bear is
Right.
like, except like right around the genitals, basically, is where it thins out.
Yeah.
And so the point there is, whether you're rocking the replaceable blades or the conventional knife, don't hesitate to switch out blades quickly if you're doing replaceables. Like I've seen dudes go through like 10 plus scalpels
right.
on one bear. And if you're taking a conventional knife, then you better have the ability to sharpen it. I don't care how sharp it is to start with or how well it holds an edge with any other animal. You are going to need that thing to be sharper, because that's going to avoid a lot of the puncture issues.
Right.
And that's really what you're trying to miss. And the nice thing with the bear is you can mess up pretty bad because of the thickness of the hide. They're going to, the tannery or the taxidermist going to be able to fix that on the underside.
Yeah.
And you're never going to know. But, get as much of those meat chunks off, score it, just give it the quick slices. If you're dark and you're trying to get the hell out of there, obviously get as much of that off. But if there's some still on, just give it a quick like crisscross pattern. Get that back to your place. Maybe let it sit out for a bit. Then you can usually get that stuff off pretty quickly and easily. But at the end of the day, it sounds so simple, but be prepared to sharpen your knife a lot or use up a lot of blades. If you're going out bear hunting and you haven't looked at how many replacement scalpels you have, look.
Yeah.
Because if you only got 3 left, that might not be enough,
right.
depending on the size of the bear. Like they destroy your blade, and so it can make for really challenging work on the back end, right? So if you're talking about that hide, you put all your time and energy, of course, into getting that meat out, whether it's deboned or not, and then you're like, oh, I got this hide to deal with, and that's where you need the sharpest knife, right? Is that really fine work where you're trying not to, puncture through. You're just trying to almost like shave off the whatever's left against the hide.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
I got one more for you.
Mm-hmm.
Any mistakes you've made that made you a better bear hunter?
Oh, I've made so many mistakes on so many hunts, man.
It's all part of it.
It's hard. Admittedly, like probably the number one is this insistence on trying to do a backpack.
Right.
I do it every year.
Yep.
Right. And then I get frustrated because we're not seeing as many as I want, or I do see one and we can't get to it, or whatever the case may be. Actually, I've got 2 probably main lessons on this. One is if cutting a tag is your number one priority, I would not advise trying to backpack hunt it.
Sure.
You're just going to see more crawling roads and glass and cuts and that sort of thing. If getting a bear is a nice to have, you got a pretty full freezer, or you're like, I'm not even sure if I can pull the trigger on one, but I'm going to get out there and I'm going to glass and look around, et cetera, then absolutely try and backpack it. At the end of the day, if there's nothing for them to eat, there's no reason they're going to be there. Right? It's not the fall where there's berries in the alpine or wildflowers or anything like that. In the spring, where there's grass and there's bears, you're going to find bears on the grass. And so, that's a mistake I've made many, many, many times, is insisting on, no, I want to do it the backpack way, not to prove anything, just I prefer it. Right?
Yeah, me too.
That's more enjoyable than crawling roads. But a lot of bears get killed crawling roads. And if you're going to cover a lot more ground, you're probably going to see some. And so, don't get stuck on, I'm going to do it, the backcountry way, because that's who I am. If actually getting a bear is your number one priority, right? If that's your number one priority, most years you're not even be able to backpack until late May, June, even into late June.
Yeah,
like Nolan, for instance, has done a few backpack bear hunts, and they never ever go until the last week of June. Now that's a function of where they're going. It's a little bit more mountainous and higher mountains and bigger mountains, but it doesn't have to be done the backpack way. That's number one. Number 2 is their vital zone's different, right? It is not the same as a herbivore. Things are a little further back and a little bit lower. If you notch it in right behind that shoulder, right, or right above the shoulder, high shoulder is a really common, shot for a lot of people. That bear's probably not going to die. And it will look like you hammered it. I can think of one that Wardo smoked. Like this thing looked like it had been hit by the hammer of Thor. And we were like, dead bear for sure. And we were on this knoll. We had buddies up on this other knoll because they kind of hiked in a little bit later than us and just stood and just kind of set up shop a little bit further away. And one of them, thankfully, had the presence of mind to keep looking. So this bear, Wardo nailed the bear. I can't remember if it was like, I want to say it was like 250 yards away. And it did the old like bit itself and then rolled down this hill. And we're like, done deal. One of those guys kept their glass on it. And Wardo and I were literally high-fiving. And they're like, he's not dead.
Oh, no.
Right? And so we're like, oh, shit. So we gather up our stuff. And this is actually a really good example of both shot placement and ground shrink, because we looked through the glass. This was actually would have been Wardo's first big game animal. So shitty way to start for him.
Right.
And this bear had rolled down in this embankment into like a little, almost like a creek bottom. And so we gather up our stuff quickly, hike down, start stalking our way there. And this pretty small bear walks out in front of us. And in my head, stupidly, I'm like, there's another bear in here? Like, how did we not blow this thing out when we shot the other one?
Right.
Because it did not look like his bear. Like, it looked so much smaller. And this is like, we're talking like 7 yards away from us.
Jeez.
Maybe 10 yards away from us, right? And it was walking perfectly normal. Like, it wasn't like, didn't look hurt, wasn't panting, mouth open because it's having a hard time breathing.
Right. Crazy.
It did not look hurt at all. And we were all just kind of caught flat-footed. I pulled my gun up and was like, well, I don't want to shoot that bear because I thought it was a new bear.
Right.
Right. And then it sees us. We've been pretty quiet. It sees us and it books off and across this sort of bowl type thing at like Mach 9.
Wow.
And so I just literally still up until this point, I'm convinced, we're all convinced, this is a completely new and different bear that we just happened to spook. And it wasn't a cub, so it wasn't like, oh shit, like, did we just shoot the sow and we didn't see the cubs in time or anything like that? This was a becoming mature bear, or it wasn't a big mature bear, but it was becoming mature bear. So Wardo goes over to where we'd last seen his bear, and I kind of hike up the embankment to see if this bear had maybe like stopped, like done the classic, sort of ran for a bit and hung out. Turns out that was Wardo's bear.
Crazy.
We found it took us hours to find just a little bit of blood.
Really?
That's the other thing, right? Like bears don't bleed like deer or elk or moose do. There's a lot of fur to soak up, or even just blood to get stuck in the fur as it's dripping down its side or wherever it is, right? So, I had a buddy years back who guided up by terrace, so a lot of bear guiding, in particular G bears, back when we used to be able to do that. And he hunted G-bears, coastal G-bears with a longbow.
Oh, Jesus.
Bit of a hardcore dude.
Yeah.
And his rule was middle of the middle. In terms of shot placement.
Interesting.
And I've heard other, very experienced bear outfitters, bear guides say similar things. And so that like perfect shoulder pocket isn't necessarily ideal with a bear.
Interesting.
You're better to just let that get back a little bit, maybe even a little bit lower than you think, depending on your shot window. But same thing with the bear I fucked up on with my bow. Now I didn't pull off a great shot, but they're tough.
Yeah.
They're real tough, and I guess in my opinion, in hindsight, is the more lead the better.
Right.
Or the more arrows, the better.
Yeah.
And don't just assume because you hammer it and it does I got bit behind the shoulder, trounces around, runs around, whatever, rolls around and then disappears, that thing's dead. It may not be.
Right.
And I'm not trying to make it scary. Like, you better be ready. Just,
No, that's great advice, because usually this is happening around dusk too. And then you go into dark timber and you don't know what the hell's going on, right? So
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. It's look, you can find all sorts. Look up bear anatomy on Google Images or whatever. You can find lots of stuff on this. But it's so easy to go on autopilot, right? And look behind the shoulder, or put your crosshairs, your pin behind the shoulder, and let her loose. And that can work, right? I'm not saying it doesn't work, but you are better served just moving back a little bit and you're going to catch something vital.
Right.
It's just not the exact same structure as a herbivore.
Yeah. Great points, man. I think, for anybody that's thinking about going out there, it's good to just refresh yourself on all this stuff. You listen to something like this, and then even the night before you go out, have a look at everything, right? Anything you're not sure about, look it over and look it over again. And then I think, you'll go out there feeling pretty confident. But if it's your first time, you just got to do it, and then you figure it out. That's, usually how it goes. And sometimes things don't go the way they planned, and that's just part of it. But the more mentally prepared you are, the better it's going to go. So,
yeah, absolutely, man. And it's, as much as we've kind of, I think, been casual about this, right? Like, it's not super serious. There's not a lot of pressure. There's not a lot of this. You can make it super easy by just crawling roads. You don't have to wear all your perfect technical gear. I mean, shit, you don't even need to wear your hiking boots sometimes, right?
Yeah.
You can wear a pair of Vans.
Sure. Yeah.
Depending on where, what the roads you're crawling. But that's not to suggest that you don't need to, I guess at the end of the day, be respectful of the animal, and do everything you can to make sure that you, if you're gonna pull the trigger or loose the arrow, that you've done everything you could to do that right. And like you said, shit still happens. And I gotta say that, like, out of the species I've hunted in BC, I probably have the most stories, or guys with the most buddies with the most stories around shit happening with bears. Yeah. So they're tricky. They're fun, but they're tricky. They're sneaky.
Yeah.
They're smart. I mean, at the end of the day, they're smarter, right? They're smarter
for sure
than a deer, an elk, a moose. And yes, it can be casual, but don't think it's easy in all the ways that it could be, right? Like, put it this way: if finding, a good buck or a good bull elk or moose was as easy as finding bears, they would be easier to hunt.
Right.
Like, it's easy to find bears, generally speaking, but you got to have your head on your shoulders, and not in a defense way. They're smarter. They're a smarter critter.
Yeah. Well, good, man. I think this gives lots of people something to chew on here. And I'm fucking pumped to get out there. The hills are looking pretty green right now. It was just before we got on here, I was standing out on my deck looking up towards Bear Creek, and it's all looking pretty green up where the fires were.
Bet it is. Yeah, I bet it is over there. Yeah.
So, if not already, time to get out there. It won't be long. So,
yeah, I got to go kill the Goonies bear.
Nice go. Yeah.
It was messing up my cam, and probably if it was in there, then it was also one that's going to be keen in on elk calves, and no dice.
Yeah.
No dice for that one. It's got a mark on it, let's say.
Awesome. Well, thanks for doing this, man. And
my pleasure, buddy.
Good luck bear hunting, and good luck with the race too.
Oh, thank you. And thanks for making this one a swapcast that we're going to run on both channels.
Glad it's been far too long since we've done this, so glad to do it.
Indeed. Well, that's the irony too, right? Like, I think people, longtime listeners, will know how far back we go.
I was doing the math, man. 8 years it goes back. So we've been, that's when we first met, and then we've been working with each other for that amount of time too. So even though we don't get to hang out too much, we're chatting on a weekly basis, basically. And
indeed.
So got to do it more.
It was fun to do it, and fun to be in the interviewee seat.
Yeah,
mostly.
Yeah,
for a change. So I appreciate that, buddy.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Okay, thanks, dude.
Cheers. There you go. Bears, snakes, dogs, running, all that good stuff. That was a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope that gave you some things to think about before you head out for bear season. One thing we didn't cover, which we probably should have, was be very cautious of a sow with cubs. So it's important that you spend the time observing and making sure that bear does not have cubs with it, because it's very hard to identify male, female bears, as most of you probably know. But put in the time before you make the shot, because the last thing you want to do is find out that there's cubs up in a tree somewhere. So take your time, have fun, and good luck out there. Cheers, guys.